Hello. So we've got a model and a view now. The model is the calculator class created in the first video, and the view is the bunch of controls that don't currently do anything. So the view model is a layer that sits between them that contains the sort of glue logic that does things like, pull the text out of the input field, pass it to a calculator, and push the result back into the result text field. So this enables all that logic to be tested separately, rather than having all that logic in the view class. Because in which case your test would have to instantiate a view object, and the view might contain lots of controls and have lots of functionality. It's much better to have it in a separate place. So the other idea of a view model is that the view will bind to it. So you can see that the properties here mirror the object, the actual controls on the view. So I've got an input property, an output property, and a calculate command that can be executed. So the view effectively each of the controls will end up binding to these things. Anyway, I'm going to get on with creating the view model. Going to be using TDD again, so I'm going to start with tests to drive this. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new unit test, especially for the view model. So I'm going to call it something like calculator view model test. Yes, thank you. Okay, so calculate view model test, and the first test is going to be something like can create view model. So view model, calculator view model equals new view model, and that just kind of will drive the creation of this new class. So this view model class, I'm going to create that in the none test project. Okay, and that test will of course pass. The purpose of that test was just to drive the development. Now obviously, I guess you kind of don't really need to do that. You could just sort of dive straight in and create that view model class, but I'm just going to go for like sort of extreme TDD here. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to check that can input sum, and all I'm going to do is test that the view model provides a field where I can input a sum into it. So view model dot input input equals say 1 plus 1, and then I'm going to assert that the value I've put into that property is the same. Yep, there we go. So that won't compile, but this drives the creation of this property. So now I believe, let's run that test. Yep, it passes. Okay, so the next one thing I'm going to test is, let's test the calculate method, the calculate command can execute calculate command. Now the whole command thing in WPF is going to be it's going to be a WPF command, which is an iCommand interface. So iCommand command equals viewModel dot calculate command. Let me just resolve iCommand and command dot execute. Oops. And what's a parameter? I think just put null in there. Okay, so I'm going to need to create that command if I just generate that property. Cool. Now I believe if I run these tests, yep, it fails because not a reference exception. Because if I go in here, aha, this calculate command hasn't been instantiated. So let me just resolve that. So I only want a getter on this. So I'm going to create a constructor here so that I can instantiate that command, that property even. Let's create a backing field for it. There we go. And the reason I wanted to do it in the constructor is because delegate command. Delegate command is allows you to use a delegate that will get called when the command gets executed. So I'm going to have it so that it will call this anonymous method, anonymous. So I'm going to return that calculator command. So at the moment that anonymous method doesn't do anything, but all I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that this will actually, I'm just satisfying the test, so the test will pass. Okay, so now on the next test, do something more substantial. Let's actually do test a sum or something. Can calculate 2 plus 2. Can calculate 2 plus 2. There we go. So view model command. Okay, first thing we need to do to calculate 2 plus 2 is to pass in 2 plus 2 into the input field. Then the command needs to be executed. Finally, assert r equal result is 4. I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out. 2 plus 2 is 4. And just checking that the view model result field equals 4. So by writing this test, it's exposed the fact there's no result field in the view model. So a bit more development driven by a test. So just generate that property. Now it will compile, but if I run it, that test will fail because result is null instead of 4. And the reason is that I haven't actually got around to implementing it. So what I'm going to do again is change that to an int as well. Create another backing field for this one. In fact, if I do really extreme TDD, I should just return 4, and I shouldn't even have a setter here. So let's do it like that. Okay, so this will actually allow the test to pass. So next test I'm going to do is just another sum, something more complicated maybe. Let's do 5 times 7. 5 times 7. So this test is going to effectively force me to actually implement the adding properly rather than just returning 4. 5 times 7, calculate command execute, the result should be 35. Run that. Oops, run all. It's failed because the actual was 4, so it's actually come out 5 times 7 equals 4. Need to fix that. And the fixes in the calculate, in this delegate that gets executed, is to actually set the result in here. Now I can't set it to 35. Well, I could do. Let's just do that for fun. First of all, I'm going to create a backing field. Okay, so let's just set result equals 35. So this will cause that test to pass. If I run all the tests, it's can calculate 2 plus 2 to fail because the results come out 35. So what this is driving me to do to fix this test is I've actually got to take into account what's coming in the input field, and obviously I've already got a calculator method to do this. So if I just instantiate the calculator class to do this, if I instantiate calculator object, I can calculator.calculate method. I can pass the input into um, into that method, like so. First of all, yep, okay, and the result will be yep. Let's just set the results like that. Okay, so if I build that now and run all the tests, oh, that passed, but it's broken another test. And the reason it's broken this test is because I haven't set, my mistake, I haven't set the inputs. They'll probably do better error validation than this, but for now I'm just going to just fix that test. Okay, so that all passes. Okay, so as a result of doing that, it's now driven the development of actually using this calculator object. So this is the full cycle now. It's receiving the inputs, instantiating calculator object, and returning the results. There's one other thing I need to do for WPF for this view model. This view model. The view binds to. Let me just show you this again. The view input text box will bind to the input property of the view model, and that means that whenever a value is changed in the input field, it will push that value into this property. Similarly, when you click on the calculate button, if it's bound to an iCommand property, it will execute that property, but the result text field won't automatically go and get that should be result there, not output. Will not automatically get the result property it's bound to. Instead, the view model is responsible for notifying the view that the property's changed. So I'm going to create a test here called, let's see, out result notification, result change notification. That's been a result change notification is fired. Okay, so in order to test this, I'm going to have to pretend I'm a view and listen in on the view model for when it changes. So there's going to be a property changed event which I can listen into, and I'm just going to use a bit of like pseudocode here just to show what should happen. That should be executed. This this method should be executed when the view model property model property changes. And what I'm going to do is check the property name and say if the property name equals result, that's what I'm expecting to change. I'm going to set has fired to true, and this is going to be a boolean. Has fired equals false. Basically, at the end of the test, I expect this to have been set to true. So if it hasn't been set to true, oops, I think there's an is true, isn't there? Is true. It'll throw an exception and fail the test. So has fired. So I expect that to be true at the end. Now I've set all that up, but I need to then like run a sum or something in order to get the get the result field to change. So there we go. I think that's right. Okay, so that won't compile. I need a property changed event in order for it to compile in the view model. This is another WPF thing. There's an I think it goes beyond WPF. I notify property changed is an interface you can implement. Let me see, resolve component model. Yeah, and all this interface defines is, if I implement that, is just an event. It defines an event, and basically any object that implements this interface is basically saying, anything else, come and register with my property changed event handler, and I'll notify you when any of my properties change, which is nice. So let's do that. Oops, I made a mistake here. Oh, okay, I need to tidy this up. I need to use the actual signature, which is this. So there's two parameters. There's the sender, which is the object, which in this case will be the view model, and then there's these property arguments, and one of these arguments contains the property name. So just put a semicolon there and get rid of this. Okay, cool. Now this won't work. Well, this will fail because it says, look, is assert is true, failed. So has fired wasn't set to true, and the reason it was is that just implementing an interface isn't going to do anything. It's got, this object is responsible for raising this event when the property changes. So here I'm just going to do if property change, if it doesn't equal null, I need to do that in case no one's registered to it. Then raise this myself. So I'm passing this as the object in the first parameter, and then the property name that's changed. And there we go. And let me just run the tests, and they should all pass. They don't. Is true, failed. Results. Let's see. Okay. So we've got a situation where it doesn't actually fire. Did I execute? I didn't execute the. That's why I didn't execute the command in the test. Okay. So that should all pass now. And implementing this property, what happens is that WPF is like clued into these objects that implement this interface, and this is used in the binding. So now everything's complete. So if I go into the view, these are the bindings here. I think I added those in the last video. Forgotten I'd done that. So this text box is the text property of the text box is going to be bound to a property called input on the view model, and the button has a command property, and that's bound to a property called calculate command, and the text block has its text bound to a property called result. So yeah, I've used the same. I've already determined what the names were going to be. So the only thing left to do is to tell this view what the context of these properties are, which objects they belong to. So in the code for the view, I'm going to say data context equals new calculator view model, and this will do it. So then the bindings will work against this object, and of course this object's all set up to do everything. So that's the only glue. The only glue was that single line is necessary. Apart from that, the view knows nothing about the view model class. These bindings will actually silently fail if these properties can't be found. So the view is completely decoupled, not only from the model, but very, extremely decoupled from the actual calculator class, because that's hidden well within this view model, and it doesn't really even know about that. So anyway, I'm going to run it now. Hopefully everything works. If I just input like 3 plus 7, hit calculate, yep, comes out as 10. 2 plus 9. So WPF in the background is every time I enter like a new value, it's actually pushing that out to the input property of the view model. Every time I hit calculate, it's actually executing the I command, that's calculate command on the view model, and when it does that, it sets its result property and triggers that property change notification, which WPF is listening in on, and when that changes, it goes and fetches the value of that property and puts it into the text field. So yeah, everything seems to be working. It's very tiny. It should be called very tiny calculator. Doesn't do a lot, but it can definitely do a few more sums than I can do. So yeah, I hope this was an interesting sort of TDD example, and thank you for watching.